Hello everybody, I hope you can hear me and see the beginning of a PowerPoint presentation and not my ugly mug. Is that right? Is it all looking good your end? If I don't hear otherwise, I'll continue. Right, so I'm going to speak to you for about half an hour about the best diving that Papua New Guinea has got to offer. Okay, why do I know a bit about Papua New Guinea? It's because I run a dive travel company called Best of PNG. We've been working with Papua New Guinea for the last 10 years. We run multiple tours every year. I've been promoting on behalf of the dive resorts in shows in Europe and the US since 2011. We create unique experiences both underwater and on land, all of which I've tested personally before I send people on them. Okay, Papua New Guinea covers 493,000 square kilometers of land and ocean. It occupies half of the island of New Guinea, which is the largest island in the world, because Australia doesn't count as an island, and a bunch of other smaller islands. If I could get my mouse to work, that we can see around here: New Britain, New Ireland, New Hanover, Bougainville, which is a semi-autonomous republic. And there are lots of, well, there are, one of the beauties about Papua New Guinea is there aren't lots of places to go diving there. There are half a dozen resorts and a couple of liverboards that run year round, and then there are a couple of liverboards that are available for private charter. So I'm going to take you through my favorites in PNG based on 10 years diving experience there and probably about 700 dives. Generally speaking, Papua New Guinea covers 4 bodies of water: the Coral Sea, the Solomon Sea, the Bismarck Sea, and the South Pacific. It's in the heart of the Coral Triangle, so the epicenter of marine biodiversity, which is fantastic. Similar species to places like Raja Ampat, but the difference is you don't see any other divers. Raja Ampat is sort of a bit like the Red Sea of Indonesia these days. You've got 40 liverboards, licensed ones, operating there, a dozen dive resorts, all sort of around the Dampier Straits and thereabout, with the odd exception. You're always going to come across, or you're often going to come across other divers and other dive boats. The beauty of PNG is you've got all that diversity underwater and very little diversity in terms of dive boats that you'll find. I mean, pretty much anywhere you dive, the only boat that you're going to come across is your dive boat. In terms of diversity on land, it's remarkable. There are 800 to 1,000 different languages spoken by the 7 million inhabitants of the country. Another great thing about PNG and its inhabitants is that most of them live in the mountains. There's very little fishing pressure from commercial fishing or from local fishing on the reefs that we dive on, because most of the people can't actually get to the sea. There's great macro and wide angle pretty much everywhere you go in the country. It's really nice diving. I don't like cold water. PNG is perfect for me. The coldest I've ever had is 26 degrees, and that was in an El Nino year when it got colder there. And in some parts of the country, we get 31 degrees pretty often. Viz, with a few exceptions when we're diving shallow bays, is generally really good, 30 meters or more. So it's just a really easy, nice place to dive. There aren't that many currents. It's perceived to be an expensive place to go diving, but the cost of resorts plus dive packages is equal to that around Raja Ampat. The domestic flights are more expensive because there's very little domestic air travel in comparison to Indonesia, so that does knock the price up a bit. But you can do a week's diving in Papua New Guinea, full board accommodation for $1,600 US. It's also perceived to be a place that's dangerous to go to. there are a couple of spots that are, I'd say, a bit sketchy after dark, but you could say that about many places around the world, dive destinations or not. There's a thing called the Global Peace Index, also known as the Global Safety Index, and it ranks different countries by, you know, how safe they are to be in. Every year, sort of Finland and Iceland battle it out with wet celery sticks and a game of chess to be #1 safest place in the world. If you were to look at the list for 2019, you'll find that Papua New Guinea ranked #100, which is 20 places above the United States of America. Also ranks above tourist destinations like the Philippines, Thailand, Brazil, Turkey, are all below PNG in terms of safety. And of all the places I've been, I find that the locals in PNG, the safest, the friendliest people I've ever come across. They love having tourists around. They don't get many of them, and they really look after them. So where can we go diving in PNG? We're going to start down here, Port Moresby. There are two options for diving in Port Moresby. Either you can dive from a place called Lolawata Island, which is a 20-minute boat ride from the capital. It's recently refurbished, lovely place to stay. Or you can dive, or you can stay at hotels in Port Moresby and get the dive boat will take you out to the dive sites. It does add about an extra hour and a half onto the day between the road transfer and then the extra boat journey out and back. But it does save money on the trip. I'll show some examples like later on. But what we're going to see in Port Moresby, there's a wide variety of dive sites here. There's some really good macro on some of the wrecks and on some of the shallow reefs, but there's a whole area called Horseshoe Reef with about 15 different dive sites on it, and there's big fish, small fish, great macro, nice schools of sweet lips, of barracuda. There's this fantastic wreck in the top right here called the Pacific Gas that was sunk in the mid-80s, 65 meters long. The stern's down at 43 meters. The top of it's about 16 meters, and that attracts schools of fish and some curious macro life as well. What's particularly good about Port Moresby diving for photographers is this fella down in the bottom right-hand corner, Rhinopia saphanis, or the lacy scorpion fish, much sought after by photographers. And the reefs around Port Moresby are a really good place to find it. I've seen two different coloured individuals on the same dive site there. We also get wobbegongs, Denise, pontos, and Bargivants seahorses. There's an A20 Havoc World War II plane wreck in pretty murky water in the bay as well. It's really good to add on a bit of Port Moresby diving before flying out to one of the other dive resorts or getting the flight to one of the liverboards. Well worth doing 3 or 4 days diving at the start of the trip or at the end of the trip around Port Moresby or Lolawata. Let's give you an example of the different prices there. If you wanted to do 4 nights, 8 dives, staying at a hotel in town, it's going to cost you $670. And if you went out to Lolawata to do the same, it would cost you $822. Okay, now we're going to move, jump on a plane and basically fly up here to Kavieng in New Ireland province. It's about an hour and 45 minutes on a twin-engine jet plane. It's probably about 1,300 kilometers as the crow flies to get there. And we're going to visit Listening Island. So this tiny little island is about 450 meters long by about 150 meters wide. There are 7 bungalows on there. It's owner operated and run. Dietmar and Ange have been there Dietmar's been there around 20 years, and Ange has been there about 15. They're on site pretty much the whole time, at least one of them. They still dive, and they've discovered a lot of the dive sites around there. Some really cool things to see from Listening. You can dive either the Pacific or the Bismarck Sea, given its location. And one of the things that is pretty specific to Listening is the profusion of World War II plane wrecks that we can dive there. The top left, there's a Jake. There are three of these Jakes in Kavieng Harbour. There are a couple of Pete reconnaissance planes as well. There's one down in the bottom right. The picture's spoiled by all the fish around it, but Deep Pete's a really cool dive. Albatross Passage was one of my favourite dive sites there. It's a wall down to about 30 meters, then it's just like a sandy plateau that the sun shines off beautifully, and it's covered in hard corals, soft corals, and on an incoming tide, big schools of jacks, barracuda, batfish, grey reef sharks. Occasionally the odd silver tip comes in as well. Stunning dive every time you dive it on an incoming tide. Other specialties there. Dietmar, despite having all these World War II plane wrecks and big fish dives, he's really into the small stuff, and he's a real cowrie geek. And I think he's discovered 7 or 8 cowrie species in his time there. And they host nudibranch workshops as well every couple of years from, I think it's Auckland University. And I think they discovered 2 to 3 dozen new nudibranch species just around New Ireland. Okay, here's some more of the signature dives from Listening. These 2 props are from a Catalina PBY flying boat that down in the bay in a refueling accident prior to the Second World War. There's a Kate bomber out at Enalava Island. From New Ireland, you can do a sort of 3-day expedition trip up to New Hanover, where there's a couple of massive Japanese shipwrecks, including the Sanko Maru. And next to the Sanko Maru, this little thing on the top right-hand corner is a Type C midget submarine that was attached to the Sanko Maru. I dived up in 2016, and those are the torpedo tubes at the front of the vessel that you can see. That's a fun dive. Right, we're going to hop on another plane and fly down to Rabaul and the town of Kokopo in East New Britain. There we can stay at Rapopo Plantation Resort or Kabaira Beach Bungalows. Nice bay, nice beaches, really nice location. In the background we have Tavavua, an active volcano that we organise treks up, so you can look into the crater. They're over, well, it's alleged that there are at least 54 Japanese shipwrecks in the bays at Blanche Bay and Simpson Harbour. About half a dozen of them are currently diveable dive sites. In 1994, Tavavua went pop in a big way and spewed meters and meters of ash into the air, some of which obviously landed on the shipwrecks and buried them. Over time, the ash has started to recede. So there's about half a dozen that we can dive now. There are also 2 really cool plane wrecks. Got a Mitsubishi Zero here, and just below it is a really nice example of a Pete float plane used for sort of multitask plane. It was used for reconnaissance, a bit of strafing, occasionally carry a bomb or 2. This is down at 26 meters deep, very close by this wreck here, which was a Japanese mine layer. Origin of the wreck unknown, sometime during the war. That's an easy dive as well. She starts at about 15 meters deep, and the stern goes down to 60 meters deep, and there's quite a bit of penetration that can be done in her too. Give you an idea of the prices there, you'd be looking at about $1,700 for 7 nights, 16 dives, a land tour and a dolphin swim, because a really cool dolphin swim that can be done up there. Return flights from Port Moresby are around $380. It's not just about wrecks in East New Britain, though. There's some really vibrant coral reefs there, and there's some good shark diving too, with reef sharks, bull sharks, the odd hammerhead. Now we're going to depart Rabaul and fly across to Hoskins in West New Britain to visit Wollindi Plantation Resort. So Wollindi has been going since the 60s. The Benjamin family who set it up originally went there to farm palm oil, and Max and Cecily, as the story goes, had this amazing bay on their doorstep. It was actually their back garden, and decided to learn to dive. So they learned to dive in their back garden, and had heard loads about how amazing the Red Sea was. So they saved up, and eventually flew over to the Red Sea, dived the Red Sea, and thought, not bad, but the back garden's better, and decided to start getting people to come out to Wollindi to dive. Since then, Wollindi's reputation has grown over the years, and I'll say hundreds of award-winning photographs have been taken in Kimby Bay, which is in front of Wollindi, or on one of the two liverboards that now operate from there. We've got the Fabrina, which has been going for 20 odd years, maybe more, and the Oceania, which started operating last year. So you can dive Kimby Bay every day from Wollindi. They'll do up to 3 dives a day. It's the only resort that offers nitrox in the country. And then the two liverboards offer a variety of different itineraries around Kimby Bay, up to the Witu Islands and across to Father's Reefs. That's one of my favourites. I've done that 3 times, and I've booked the Fabrina again for September next year. Still got spaces available for a 9-night charter to dive, my favourite dive sites of West New Britain. They also run seasonal trips across the Solomon Sea and down to Milne Bay that we'll look at a bit later on. To give you an idea of prices, 7 nights at Wollindi, full board with 12 dives, starts at $1,720 US. A 9-night signature itinerary liverboard is, for next year, is $4,600. What do you see out there? I mean, everything. The colours at Wollindi are fantastic. Macro, it's amazing. Every time I go, I take one of my fish ID books and critter ID books and make a little shopping list of weird critters I've never seen. Speak to the dive guides, and at some point during my time there, I'll get a tap on the shoulder when I'm underwater, and a few items of my shopping list will be pointed out to me as the week progresses. There's a reef out at the Witu Islands called Cracker Fat, which has just got the biggest school of jacks on it I've ever seen anywhere in sort of 3,000 dives around the world. These 2 images are just like a very small part of the school. Photos don't really do it justice. It's one of those things where you've got to put the camera down and look at it and just try and keep your mouth shut to keep the reg in. And we have dives out there with silvertip sharks. There's some really friendly turtles, especially out on at Father's Reefs. Some other specificities out at the Witus. There's this little funny white and pink guy in the top left, Coleman's pygmy seahorse. Very few places where you can find this. I think the next closest one is Lord Howe Island down in Australia, which is about 3,000-4,000 kilometers away. Lots of Denise's pygmy seahorses around, loads and loads of schools of barracuda. I mean, every day in first dive, we'll start on a dive site with a big school of barracuda and jacks. There's also this really cool Mitsubishi Zero, 13 meters deep in Kimby Bay, and plenty of grey reef sharks knocking around as well. Right, and next on our whistle-stop tour of Papua New Guinea, we're going to jump in a plane, fly to Port Moresby, because there's no other option, get in another plane and fly across the Owen Stanley Range to Tufi Dive Resort. So at Tufi Dive Resort, we're diving in the Solomon Sea. Tufi is a really unique location. It's perched up on the top of some tropical fjords that make up the Cape Nelson Peninsula. It has 23 rooms and bungalows of 3 different sort of levels of quality, but they're all very comfortable to stay in, all have AC. What do we see in Tufi? Well, from the wharf, there's actually superb macro. Every afternoon, I'll just jump straight in with my camera and spend 90 minutes pottering around, shooting different macro subjects. There's always something to see down there. Literally every 5 meters, there's a new subject to take a picture of. Out on the outer reefs, there's lots of big schools of fish, lots of pinglau snapper, barracudas, jacks. We also have dive sites. There are the 3 dive sites with manta cleaning stations, plenty of grey reef sharks. The corals are in superb condition. There's a couple of dive sites where we see sort of albino scalloped hammerheads, just a couple of them hanging around together. Lots of schools of batfish a bit deeper down, some dogtooth tuna, all sorts of stuff there. We've got blue ring octopus, loads and loads of magnificent anemones, and a variety of different clownfish. I think there are 9 different anemone fish species in the country. Just off the wharf, there's a cool mandarin fish dive at dusk, and then about 3.5 to 4 hours boat ride from the resort on a flat day. We can find B17 blackjack down at 51 meters deep, which is a really special dive. To give you an idea of prices here, 7 nights, full board, 15 dives, $1,570, plus domestic flights of about 400. Okay, from Tufi, we've got 4 minutes left. We're going to hop down to Milne Bay, down here in the south, where the Oceania, the new boat started operating last year, runs seasonal trips around March and April. Milne Bay again has great macro. There's one liveaboard, the Churton, which is for private charter only. Rob Van der Loos, the owner, is mad about macro. He's a big nudibranch fan. There's loads of nudies down there, lots and lots of cool macro. There's a magnificent reef called Deacon's Reef, which you can see these Gorgonian fans here. They're only about 7 meters deep, and they're right up against the side of the main island. So you can get a shot looking up and see the trees through the water. Milne Bay has a nice variety of rays. There's also a couple of spots where there are manta cleaning stations where reef mantas come in. And we also have a P-38 Lightning down at Basilaki Island in the Engineers group of islands in southern Milne Bay, which is a really cool dive site. And the Oceania can also visit B-17 Blackjack. There's also a B-25 called Pissed Off in the area as well. Milne Bay is also a really good spot for the lacy scorpion fish. Down here, I've seen 3 different coloured individuals on one dive. There's a Milne Bay epaulet shark as well. And this little fella in the bottom left is allegedly a different species of an undescribed species of pygmy seahorse, possibly going to be called the Milne Bay pygmy seahorse. It behaves very much like Ponto's pygmy seahorse in that it's an absolute bugger to take a picture of, because all it ever does is turn its back towards you. So that's as good as I got. What else is there to do in Papua New Guinea apart from all this amazing diving? PNG is the best country in the world for tribal culture and festivals. With over 800 different languages spoken in the country, there are many different cultures. And there are two big festivals that take place, one in August at in Mount Hagen, which is probably the most well known, and then in September there's the Goroka Festival, which is actually bigger than the Mount Hagen Festival and is my preferred festival of the two. I go to the Goroka Festival every year. I've been going there since 2010, except this year, alas. But it's a fantastic place to witness the variety of cultural differences within PNG. At Goroka, we have up to 130 different tribal groups meet for the weekend and dance and sing in a rugby field, basically, and we get to wander around and take pictures and video of it. Up in the north of the country, there's a river called the Sepik, or the Sepik, however you want. And here we organise trips either in a couple of luxury lodges or trips that I escort, staying in village guest houses, really basic accommodation. It's only for 2-3 nights. And we get to go and visit the different villages, different cultures. These guys are a part of a group of tribes known as the Crocodile Men, who practice scarification as a rite of passage. So we wander around in motorized dugout canoes, visit different spirit houses, which have got loads of ornate and amazing carvings in them. And we also go out and stay on a couple of islands out in the bay, in guest houses as well, to visit the villages there and experience and witness their different cultures. So next year, I've got a couple of group tours going on to the Mount Hagen Festival in August, Goroka Festival. We have a short tour for 4 nights in September. And I also lead a longer tour through the highlands for a week, and we go looking for birds of paradise around Mount Hagen, visit the Asaro Valley for a couple of nights, and then end up at the Goroka Festival. And that leads on to a Sepik tour straight after for 5 nights. Before all of that, I have a Fabrina underwater photography liverboard trip going on to Kimby Bay, Witu Islands and Father's Reefs, and we also have a yoga instructor on board if that sort of thing floats your boat. And there we go.